Hello, and welcome to the Perfect Franchise Podcast.
I'm Kris, and joining me is my wonderful co-host, Andrea.
In this podcast, we're on a mission to help you discover all that franchising has to offer.
We'll explore expert strategies, interview successful franchise owners, and give you the tools to make informed decisions.
So whether you're considering your options or you're ready to take that plunge, we're here to support you every step of the way.
So let's jump into today's episode.
Hi, welcome to another episode of the Perfect Franchise Podcast. Today, Andrea and I are very excited to have Jason Miller with us. Jason is the CEO of a Patrice and Associates, which is a staffing franchise, and we're excited to learn more about it. Jason, welcome to the podcast.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be with you today.
Yeah, it's great. Well, Jason, so Kris said the staffing. Fill us in a little bit. What exactly does Patrice and Associates do?
Yeah, so basically, we are a recruiting firm. We're a permanent placement, contingency-based recruiting firm. So what that means is we don't do temporary staffing or contract staffing or anything like that. We focus on finding salaried level positions. But the really unique thing is that we focus on a very specific niche. Patrice, our founder, started the company in 1989. She wanted to start a recruiting business, and she happened upon a Bob Evans restaurant that needed some help finding a manager. And she was like, wow, I didn't even know restaurants use recruiters, but, let's dive into this a little bit. So she started placing assistant managers, general managers, and chefs in the Virginia, Maryland, DC area. And she really saw that she had something. And over a 20-year period, she kind of became known as the gold standard for providing talent in the restaurant, hospitality, food and beverage, and entertainment industries. And ultimately, we started franchising in 2010. But that's kind of always been our core, is finding salaried level talent from a quick service restaurant all the way up to a large food and beverage company. But the biggest evolution that we've had is we've turned into a true executive search firm. Whereas before it was the assistant manager, general manager, chef. Now we've dug deeper into these relationships that we have, and we're not just working with a location on the street corner. We're working a lot of times with major restaurant groups that own 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 of a particular chain. So really large franchise entities themselves of a particular brand, or the corporate headquarters. And now we're basically finding senior level positions, director, VP, president, C-suite, in really any skill category. So marketing, tech, finance, IT, HR, sales, operations. So at this point, it could be anything from a manager at a Panera all the way up to a CEO. Again, primarily focused on restaurant and hospitality. But as our executive search program has grown and our franchisees come from a lot of different backgrounds, we don't limit them to hospitality. I think that's important to point out. They've gone out and they've identified their target niches. And we have made placements in industries like construction, engineering, insurance, oil and gas, sales, education. But that's what we are at a core. We're a permanent placement firm with a specific niche in restaurant and hospitality. And we go out, find talent, help people change their career trajectory, and we help big businesses to find the right talent so their organizations can run more effectively.
Jason, I know I always get confused when talking and hearing about the staffing recruiting world with some of the buzzwords. So permanent placements, you explain that. That's, you're looking for salaried or hourly wage jobs that are not temporary, right? You throw out another buzzword, contingency. So explain that to the folks. And to me, what's that mean?
So you have the everybody knows the temporary staffing or maybe a contract staffing. They're on a contract basis. And then there's generally, if you're thinking about finding salaried level talent, there's a couple different ways organizations can go about it. The majority of what we do is contingency based, meaning that you're not going to pay us anything unless we find someone. So let's say it's a general manager that has an $80,000 salary. In that example, we'll probably tell the client we charge a minimum 15% fee. So in this case, we're going to charge 15% of 80,000. So we're going to charge you a $12,000 fee that you're going to pay us within 30 days of agreeing to hire that person. So you're not going to pay us anything unless it's contingent upon you hiring them. And that's 95% of our business. Now, as our executive search program has grown, we have started to do retained search agreements where a company will pay us a set monthly fee on an ongoing basis. It's to say, hey, if all I'm doing is working with you, Mr. and Mrs. Client, for the next 6 months, and I'm finding 3 executive level positions, and I'm going to charge you X amount a month. So this is going to be a retained search where I, Jason, am only working with your business. And then there's some other ways to do it as well, where maybe charge a third up front, a third when we present candidates, a third when we find the hire. But those are things that happen on a case by case basis with executive search. But contingency just means you're not going to pay us until we find someone.
Yeah. Okay. Can I ask a follow-up question too, then, since I'm learning about this world? My understanding that there's two sides of it, right? There's you've got to find the client, the business that needs someone, and then you've got to find someone for that business. So are franchisees engaged in both sides or one side? How's that work?
Yeah, great question. So the general appeal of Patrice and Associates, other than the home base aspect and the lifestyle aspect and the low investment aspect, is that we provide clients. So if they logged into our system this morning, they'd have access to a database of about 800,000 candidates, and they have access to hundreds of jobs, which are signed contracts and positions that need to be filled. So some of these jobs, some of these clients are corporate clients, meaning we've gone out and procured those clients and opened them up to the franchisees. Our franchisees are able to go out and sign their own clients, which they can keep for themselves, or they can open them up to the system. So the open jobs, which our franchisees are able to start working from day one, are available to everyone. So what we say in this model is you do have an opportunity for a faster path to cash flow because the clients are already there. In most staffing and recruiting firms, you get a marketing plan, you get a blueprint, then you have to go out and find your own clients before you can start recruiting. So here that's already done. And frankly, they don't ever have to go out and sign their own clients if they don't want to. They should. But in the beginning, the answer to the question is it's primarily focused on sourcing, finding the people, because the jobs are already there. Finding the people, making the placements is going to be the faster path to cash flow. And we give them the ability to do that through our database, through things like Signal Hire, which is kind of like Zoom Info, which allows them to access millions and millions of candidates through LinkedIn. We have other strategic partnerships with job boards that they can take advantage of. So in the beginning, we really encourage them to focus on sourcing, finding the talent, and that's always going to be kind of the main revenue stream. But over time, the answer is yes, they are going to go out and sign their own clients, which they can then keep for themselves, or they can open up to other franchisees. So ultimately, it's a little bit both, and then they can scale their agency if they want to.
All right. I think I understand it better now.
So, Jason, you talk a little bit like they have clients there that are in the system they can use. They have candidates potentially there, but they have to go find both of those themselves too. So, do they need a really strong sort of B2B networking, business development? Is that the type of candidate that you're looking for?
That's certainly the ideal candidate. Generally, I kind of see it boiling down to 3 different types of, let's say, ideal candidates. I mean, somebody with a hospitality background's usually a no-brainer, just because they understand the industry. They probably have a network. We've seen individuals come into this with a hospitality background do well, which makes sense. Absolutely, you're spot on with the sales business development background. You are not going to be successful in this business if you do not pick up the phone, if you don't build relationships. We tell everybody the system works if you work the system. You have a database, you have Signal Hire, you have clients, but it's not a magic wand. The franchisees that are doing well are picking up the phone, they're making calls, they're talking to people, they're networking in their local communities, they're doing client development. So someone that has done sales, that has done business development, that is networking, comfortable talking to people, is a great fit. And then we have had franchisees with HR backgrounds that have done well, right? They've spent their whole career assessing talent, putting people in the right places, finding the right fit, cultural alignment, things like that. So those are the 3 that really bubble to the surface. Now, we have teachers that are successful. We have former UPS truck drivers that are successful that, just like talking to people and educating and nurturing. But I do want to stress that if you're going to be a successful recruiter, you have to be comfortable doing the activity. And that means talking to lots of people, because to a certain extent, at least in the beginning, it's a numbers game. But it's kind of like real estate. You hustle a little bit in the beginning, you start to build a book, you start to get a referrals, word of mouth, those types of things. But you do have to be comfortable doing the activity.
Jason, does this business scale? Meaning, I see it for sure being perfect for someone who doesn't want a lot of employees, wants to build a nice business for themselves. You have a lot of infrastructure around that person that we'll talk more about. But what if I do want it to become more than just me in my, you know, uh, grind and leveraging my time? Um, are franchisees doing it out there, and how do they do it?
Yeah, the in my mind, there's two ways you can scale. You can scale by signing and developing your own book of business, signing your own clients, and then building a team of recruiters. If you ask me which one you should do first, you should definitely sign your own clients first. If you sign your own clients, you're going to have that close knit relationship. You're really going to understand who they need. Generally, it can lead to better send out to higher ratios. And it'll help you to attract recruiters, right? Because you can say, hey, above and beyond what Patrice and Associates brings to the table with the corporate accounts, I have 2, 3, 5 of my own clients that I portion off for my recruiters. And that's one way to scale before recruiters. And I don't know if you want to call it scale or passive income, or it's certainly not you necessarily doing the recruiting. But as I mentioned before, let's say they get a restaurant group that has locations in 3 states. They could say, hey, restaurant group, if I'm in Connecticut, I'll do a great job sourcing all the open positions here in Connecticut, but I'm part of Patrice and Associates. I can open up the jobs in New York and New Jersey. Jason, will be your singular point of contact, but I can open up the roles in these other states so we can get these jobs filled quicker. So it makes a client happy because they have a singular point of contact, access to a nationwide network. But for me as the account manager, if that New Jersey franchisee sources a candidate and makes a placement with my client, then then I'll get a 20% cut of the revenue right off the top. So if somebody makes a $10,000 placement with my client, then I'll get $2,000 as the account manager. So that's a way to make passive income and sort of scale your income without doing the recruiting. And then, yes, we do have franchisees that have recruiters. You can have as many recruiters as you want. There's no limit to that. Your recruiters can work anywhere in the country. So if you want to create an actual agency where you have a team of recruiters, you have your own clients, then the franchise owner's role kind of evolves where maybe they're doing some recruiting, they're doing some client development, they're managing their recruiters, and you kind of have those 3 different sort of revenue streams that are happening.
That's great. A lot of different revenue streams. Appreciate you going through that. So, Jason, you talked a little bit about sort of this database that you have that has clients in it, it has, employee potential, candidates that you can leverage. What other support are you providing these people? So they come in and they're a teacher, they're a UPS driver. What else is Patrice and Associates helping them so that they can build that business?
Okay, it's going to be a long answer because we offer a lot of support. So they go through training, right? Training is a week. It's primarily focused on sourcing, right? So they start making calls day 2 of training. So they're selecting jobs and they're starting that recruitment process day 2. So the first week is really about sourcing and building that book of candidates because that's the fastest way to generate revenue. They learn a lot. It's a lot of information. And then they start working their business the following Monday. We don't just kind of say, see you later, see you at our annual conference, thanks for your time. Then they start going through a post-training and mentorship process. So the post-training is a series of calls each week that are focused on a specific core aspect of the business. So we'll start focusing on client development and we'll go through client development strategy. We'll go through figuring out a target niche. We'll figure out some clients in your area that are already in the database that you've maybe searched outside of the database through Signal Hire and other means and start to create a client development target list. Another aspect of the post training will be focused on scaling your business. So if you do want to build an office, how do you run a successful office? How do you hire a recruiter? When should you fire a recruiter? How do you compensate your recruiters? Later on, we'll start to go into executive search. We want them to focus on the core business out of the gate because those are the jobs that need to be filled quickly. But many people want to do executive search. So we have a client development component of the post training, we have a scaling the business portion of the post training, and we have an executive search portion of the post training. And that lasts for many weeks outside of class, 4 to 6 weeks outside of class. And then after that, or excuse me, in conjunction with that, they have a mentor. So they're going to have a daily mentor call for the first 3 months of their business. So that following Monday, they're going to arrange whatever time it is with their mentor. It could be the morning, could be afternoon, could be evening, could be a different time each day. And that call is not a group setting. That's a one-on-one call where we say, hey, Rebecca, what are you working on today? How many calls have you made? Do you need help with formatting this particular resume? Or you got a client on the hook? Let's talk about what are the job recs that they need? How do we position the pricing for this? So you have the one-on-one mentor for the first 90 days to help you out with anything specific that you need. After that post-training and mentorship, they're going to continue to have a weekly call with their mentor, and they'll have calls with their regions ongoing in perpetuity. We do all franchisee calls a minimum of twice a month, which are heavily attended. Recently this year, I've been doing them almost every week. So there's at least 2 all franchisee calls every month. We do think pods, which are franchisee-led discussions on different strategies, whether it's marketing or client development or different things like that. And I'm really excited that yesterday, Monday, we launched our new intranet site, which has a tremendous amount of collaboration tools where franchisees can create their own groups. If they want to focus on marketing or construction, they can create those groups and start to collaborate. So there's a tremendous amount of support coming out of the gate in that first 3 to 6 months. And then after that, it's the weekly calls and the regional calls with their mentors, the all franchisee calls that we do together. And there's other stuff too. We've negotiated great educational partnerships with our strategic partners. Doesn't always include a discount, but whereas ZipRecruiter or Indeed, core partners that we work with, are coming on a monthly basis and doing education sessions on, hey, if you're using this tool, here's how you use it most effectively. We bring in guest speakers that are top recruiting speakers to share industry insights. So it's not just always coming from the franchisor.
Yeah,
So
a lot of support.
a lot of support, and that
Yeah.
will be validated for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. For that kind of support, you have to have started in 1989, right?
Yeah,
It doesn't happen
exactly.
overnight.
Exactly.
So speaking of starting in 1989, that means you've been through quite a lot of different economic ups and downs, different interest rates, labor markets, presidents. Um, how does this industry and your business specifically ride those waves? Is it able to do that? Does it you compared it earlier in the role to being like real estate. We know real estate can be subject to really boom and bust. Is recruiting the same way, or is it insulated in some way?
I think the niche that we focus on is insulated in some ways. And we could have an hour session just on this, but you know, being around for 30 years, Patrice has, wavered pretty any storm that's come. Uh, I think there's always going to be one side of the equation that needs a little bit more help, right? Sometimes there's a lot of jobs and maybe the, job market's really good, or meaning that everybody has jobs. So we have to be a little bit more proactive. We got to pick up the phone and we got to talk to people that are currently employed and get them excited about a role where, maybe they're not actively looking. So maybe the clients need more help in some economic climates. On the other hand, maybe there's mass layoffs, right? And now there's not as many jobs and there's candidates that are looking, and they love working with us because we do have clients that need people. So the biggest sort of frustration that candidates have is, man, I'm having a really hard time getting to the decision maker or the hiring manager. Well, we already have those individuals here. So let us make sure you're a good fit, and then we'll get you connected with the hiring manager. But there always seems to be some ebb and flow where we have more jobs in this particular scenario, or we have more candidates in this particular scenario. Um, the worst thing that could have happened to this business was COVID, right? Um, you know, and again, we could do a whole nother session on that, but that was the biggest thing that affected our business. The job market, the labor market, everybody's going to go out to eat. There's always high turnover in the restaurant industry, so there's always a demand for our service. So in that sense, I think we're kind of insulated from just general ups and downs of the economic shift, because people are always going to go out to eat. Maybe they're not going to go to the high-end steakhouses, but they're still going to go to Panera and Mission Barbecue and Chick-fil-A. And even during COVID, for a lot of these businesses, their fast food and their takeout and delivery skyrocketed. So we were still doing quite a bit of hiring with those brands, not as much with the table full service clients. But it all changes. Like, so COVID was kind of slow in 2020, 2021. When things started opening up, it was like, order taking as we were getting back to pre-pandemic levels, right? 2021 and end of 2021, 2022. So many people needed to hire because they were getting back to pre-pandemic levels. We're pretty much at that point. So, that huge steep curve is now leveled out where, okay, there's clients and there's candidates, and we have to go out and find those candidates. But the biggest thing that all recruiting firms are navigating right now is technology, automation, and AI. And that's where I think the recruiting firms that are really going to win are going to have the connection of high touch recruiting, but also technology. I think the ones that go too technology focused are going to alienate the candidates, and the candidates are going to try to go find the jobs themselves. I think the firms that are going to win are going to be the firms like us that have high touch recruiting, right? The candidates that we speak to, even in the discovery process, that are balancing investing in a franchise versus getting a job, they're frustrated with AI because they are getting weeded out. They're not getting a chance to talk to the hiring manager. So if we go find them, we can say, hey, we already have all that. Let's make sure you're a good fit, and then let's get you that person. But we do need to figure out how to get to those people quicker, and that's where using AI for sourcing and automation to at least say, hey, we already have the hiring manager, right? It might be a text, or it might be a call, or it might be an AI agent saying, Melissa, I think you're a really good candidate. I already have the job and the hiring manager. Do you have 5 minutes to speak to me about the opportunity, right? So that's where I think the technology piece comes into play, but also having that high touch people component. And that's the biggest thing that I think recruiting firms are navigating right now is what's the perfect balance, or what's the right balance of technology and people. And it seems as though the ones that are going to have the high touch recruiting with some level of technology are the ones that are going to win.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, it
Great
does.
answer. Andrea,
Definitely.
you ready
Yeah,
to take Jason across the finish line with a couple rapid fire questions?
definitely. So Jason, reminder on these ones. Just answer for any franchise, not just Patrice and Associates. So kind of start us out with, if somebody is going through this process, they're considering becoming a business owner, what's advice you're going to give them as they're exploring businesses?
Yeah, I think when people are looking at franchising, I think at first glance they are saying, okay, I've got systems, I've got the marketing, I've got the branding, and then some people come in and they just assume that it's all going to happen magically, right? Um, and they don't necessarily view it as something where they actually have to come in and work the business. And that's where I think conversations with franchisees are really going to be important. Not just figuring out the validation on the support and obviously the monetary component to it, but what do I really have to do as an owner, right? Semi-absentee is a big buzzword in franchising, which kind of means, hey, I can work it a little bit, but I don't have to work it that much. And then sometimes people get into the business and they're like, well, this isn't as semi-absentee as I thought. So you know the advice that everybody gives is talk to as many franchisees as possible, as you should. But I also think you need to go into it understanding that it's a business that you have to work. The franchisors are there to give you the systems and the marketing help, but you still have to go out there and do it. It doesn't mean that everything is going to work for you. And the way you're going to get those insights is talking to franchisees and figuring out how much time are you really putting into the business, or if your ramp up capital was said to be this, is it really that much, or do I need a little bit more? And those are the things that I generally see is you want to try to go into it with eyes wide open. Um, the pillars of franchising are marketing and support and roadmaps for success. But The franchisee is the one that sort of melds all those together and then pushes the business forward. And I think you just need to know from other franchisees, what they're needing to do in order to do that effectively.
Yeah, no, it's great advice. And so now, fast forward, they've been in a year, they've been in business, that challenging first year. What's your advice during that first year to a candidate?
So I'll tell you the advice that I give to our franchisees, because this business certainly has ebbs and flows, right? It is like real estate. You might have a month where you sell a bunch of homes, the next month you don't sell a home. In this business, you might have a really good month with placements, the next month you might not have a placement. um, the franchisors that have the right systems and support and marketing, the system works if you work the system. And my advice is, if you're looking back at the business and you look at what went well, what didn't well, I would first look at the system, and was there anything that you were doing to deviate from the system? And if that's the case, I think you might need to look introspectively and say, okay, maybe that wasn't the right way to go about it. I think you should always connect with other franchisees that you see, not necessarily on the leaderboard, but that are active in the business, right? Maybe they're doing something on social media that you see that seems to be really interesting, and, connect with those other franchisees that are out and about and doing things, and learn from them, right? Some of the best ideas in franchising history have come from franchisees. So, I would say stick to the system. I would say, network and connect with other franchisees that are working the business, because you can always glean some things from them. That's kind of what we do here with the Think Pods. Is we've had franchisees that are doing some cool things locally that I haven't even thought of, and other franchisees are willing to take that information back and implement it in their business. And those I think would be the two things.
Yeah, I think that's great. Great advice. I think anytime you can kind of dive in and raise your hand, ask more questions, call those fellow franchisees, it's really helpful. So that's really great advice. Thanks for that, Jason. So we really appreciate you coming on today to talk about Patrice and Associates. We haven't talked to anybody about staffing. It's always one of those ones where it's a B2B business. It's out there. It's obviously a need. We hear from clients all day long. How do I hire? How do I find anyone to work for me? And so it's really great to kind of have you come in and go through not only the business and the support that you have, but the challenges, the different market trends, and the ability to sort of put different revenue sources in to help level that out for some of your franchisees. So I appreciate that, Jason. Thanks so much for coming in. So, if you're thinking about franchising, remember that while there's no one size fits all, the perfect franchise for you is definitely out there. To explore your options, visit theperfectfranchise.com and click on Let's Talk to schedule a call with a consultant on the Perfect Franchise team.